Today is the first in a series of interviews we're going to be doing looking at trauma surrounding pregnancy and childbirth. So today we're going to be looking at infertility and miscarriage, and I have the lovely Malcolm and Nick with me today, so welcome to you both. Your journey has been a real roller coaster, hasn't it, over the years? Do you just want to tell us a little bit about it?
So we were married in 1995. Very shortly after we got married, we discovered that things weren't happening normally for us in terms of becoming pregnant and having children. So we went to the doctor, then they referred us to hospital, went through infertility treatments, and you sit in the doctors thinking, this is the answer we need, this is the fix, you know, it's all going to be okay. And those treatments didn't work, they weren't successful. So the emotions of hearing that everything's going to be fine and then it doesn't work, that ebbs and flows, quite traumatic. And in the end we were like, this isn't doing us any good, it's not doing our spiritual life any good, we need to just step away. So we prayed a lot together about it, and then we said, okay, we're going to stop fertility treatment. And we prayed and said, Lord, if you want us to have kids, then you have to do it. And then in 2004, we were pregnant. Sadly, after 15 weeks, we had a miscarriage, lost that child. And then in 2011, again, had another pregnancy confirmed. And again, suffered a miscarriage. And then in 2018, discovered that I was pregnant, but in the same hand as finding out we were pregnant, found out it was ectopic. So went through the trauma of that.
I was going to say, to be told you're infertile, to have that, I suppose, label as well, must be quite hard. And then to lose 3 babies. How did you cope with all of that?
For Nicky and myself, it's quite different how we coped. I'm very much a bloke about stuff. So my whole thing was trying to be supportive and, you know, help Nicky process what was going on, and I didn't really think too much about my own feelings in that. It's probably a bad move now when you think about it, but it's a tough one because, you know, everything around us, everything tells us, you know, oh, you know, you're married, you're going to have kids, it's going to be amazing. You know, it hits really hard you know, when you find out that you're maybe not going to have kids. So yeah, it's tough.
And for you, Nicky?
Yeah, I think there have been times where you just hit rock bottom and it's like, oh, my goodness, how can I carry on? How can I keep going, knowing all that's happened, and then holding on in the midst of that and going, actually, I know that God's got me. And one of the things I say to Malcolm is, when you hit rock bottom, that's when you really get to know the rock. And you know who's there, who's holding you, who's steady, who's firm and constant, and the God that doesn't change, he's the same. So even though we're up and down, and some days are great days and there's laughter, and other days there's tears and pain, God's completely consistent and faithful and reliable and trustworthy, and that's our testimony really of how deeply precious that is to us, that God doesn't shift, alter or change, that he's the same and he's constant and true in the midst of whatever we go through, whatever trauma, however desperate life feels, that there's a God that we can go to who doesn't change, and his faithfulness holds us through facing really horrible times. And I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, it still hurts, and there are times where there are still tears, but it's handling that in such a way that you're going to God with that pain rather than holding it against God or blaming God for what you're going through.
So kind of looking back, are there any things that you would say have been helpful along the way, or on the contrary, any things that have been unhelpful, maybe other people's responses as well?
Yeah, so we've had a mixed bag of helpful and unhelpful. There are certain cultures that have things about if your wife can't give you a child, then you can divorce them, and all this sort of thing. And people tell you that, and you think, actually, that's really not overly helpful right now.
Not the best
Thank
thing.
You. But there's also the whole thing of what your doctor is like and what your hospital is like. So we've had really bad experiences and really good experiences.
Right.
So we've had hospitals and consultants who've not helped and not been great. And then especially like during the ectopic pregnancy, my own GP would ring us unprompted several times the weeks after, just to see how I was doing, which completely blew me away. I was like, wow.
And I mean, I think it's not just, you know, on the medical profession, but with family as well, because many times family don't know how to ask a question. They want to love and support and care, but they don't actually know what to say. And so there are times where family have put their foot in it, but sometimes that's not that they've said anything wrong, it's just that's how we're feeling at that moment, and they're not to know. But it took us a long time to process that, you know, to understand that maybe people are asking actually the right questions and out of care and love and support, but how we feel is often dependent on how, you know, how we receive that question is how we're maybe feeling at that moment. And they have no reason to know that.
No.
Because we've hidden it away and we're trying to process stuff ourselves.
How have you managed seeing family members, close friends, having children? Because that must have been hard.
Yeah, it has been tough. One of my sisters has 11 children.
Oh, right, okay.
So between us, we have 21 nieces and nephews.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing because we love them so much. And it's always been very hard when you hear that someone's like pregnant and having a child, and you think, oh, that's tough going. And then the joy of meeting your niece or nephew has been stunning. And at the same time, we had a situation where a teenager in our church in London became pregnant, and I always remember finding that really, really hard. And God taught me through that, don't compare. And actually that was a really key thing for me to learn. So God taught me that lesson, don't actually look at it like that. So I think God's helped us along the way, because it has been tough. But at the same time, we also know that we have got 3 children, at least 3 that we know about, who are in heaven, and that one day we're going to meet them. I'm longing for heaven. I can't wait to be like face to face with Jesus. But the added bonus that we're going to meet our children is huge.
So just going back to when you lost your 3 children, is there anything that you did or the hospital did that kind of helped you in that grief process in the sort of immediate days after or while you were there?
Yeah, because obviously the thing that has changed now, which we didn't ever experience, was they are now giving certificates for people that lose children through miscarriage early on. And I think for us that would have been helpful to actually
sort of
acknowledge that this was a life that you have lost. But for us, the early pregnancy unit at the hospital near us, they had like this little bag, and it had like a little crocheted heart and a candle and a little verse.
Just really helpful.
Just really simple things, but actually I really treasured it. And someone in our church gave me a little thing of hands with a little child in it, and that's so precious to us.
I mean, I think one of the things that we found, and I never imagined this would be the case, but on one occasion with one of the kids that we lost, that people just kept delivering flowers. I know it sounds really random. We just got so many flowers would come, and every one of them had this beautiful note just saying I love you, or big hugs. Nothing more complicated, nothing really profound, but they just kept coming, and so our whole home was just full of flowers, and it just showed the love and care and support that people had. People didn't know what to say, we didn't know what to say, but people just loved to just know that there are people around that just love you, who are just there if you need them.
You talked a little bit ago just about supporting Nick. How did you eventually deal with your own grief?
I mean, definitely initially, I didn't even take any notice of it. I didn't even really acknowledge it, I don't think. because my focus was purely on Nicky.
Yeah.
You know, the physical things that I could help her with, or just the emotional support, and so just didn't deal with any feelings I had. To the point where Nicky started to worry more about me.
Right.
You know, oh, you're right. Have you spoken to someone? Have you spent time? So I think for me, only in retrospect, I think I realised that actually I'd got into quite a deep depression. So I was in a really low place. And it was very much sort of having people around that just loved and cared and were like, are you all right? You know, you've got people that ask you that and you're like, yeah, that's fine. And there are some certain people in your life who, when they ask you, you just like allow all this stuff to just fall out, and you just like, oh, where did that come from? And it's really, I think, important, whatever we're going through in life, to have people around us who we can be really real with. They don't judge, they just love you, whatever the situation is. And it definitely made me more able to support Nicky and help her. And they pointed me to God, which is where I needed to be, rather than just wallowing in, you know, self-pity and why am I so exhausted? Well, because you're just focusing, just looking after Nicky and not actually looking after yourself. It wasn't a natural thing for me to do.
Yeah.
It took a lot.
That's so important.
Yeah, and so I'm very, very grateful to those people that did keep asking.
Yeah.
They didn't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, at one point we had found ourselves, we'd very much withdrawn, because we were still, you know, in a lot of grief and hurt, really. And so we'd withdrawn a lot from the church. We, you know, people still loved us and cared for us, but we'd taken a step back.
Right.
So thankfully there were people who just kept coming and kept asking.
So it would be very easy, wouldn't it, in many ways, to be angry with God. So why did you stop yourself going down that route?
We talked about it a lot because people said to us, are you really angry with God? And we were like, no, actually we're not. And it's not something we struggled with. We were probably angry at the situation.
Right. Which is different, isn't it?
Yeah, but not at God. At the end of the day, we trust God with our lives. Yeah. And that's something that we've held on to. Whether or not that pans out the way that we hope or that we long for, you know, it's just hanging on to God and trusting Him whatever. I remember we used to pray quite a lot, whatever, Lord, and that was our prayer in some really dark times. But yeah, He kept us and He held us. We changed, made a conscious choice as well, I think. Yeah, that's true.
So we weren't asking the question, you know, why me, which is that thing that, you know, you begin to ask, you know, why did this happen to me? Why me? It's so unfair. All of those sorts of questions. And we're like, well, none of those questions help the situation.
No. And they don't change the situation.
And they don't change the situation. So, you know, we very much had a different questioning of, well, you know, God, to what end? You know, what's the purpose behind this? You know, and actually changing our focus. But it was, you know, it sounds easy to say, but it's not an easy choice sometimes. And there were days where it was really hard just to look to God, because you didn't want to. But it wasn't. I think you're right. I don't think we were ever angry with God, but very much, you know, looking to Him was the key to getting through.
Yeah, definitely.
You did touch on this a little bit at the beginning, but looking back now, 18 years down the road since you first got married, what would you say you've learnt about God over those years and all that you've been through?
I think, like I said to you earlier, that deeply precious thing that He doesn't shift or alter. And there's a few verses that have really helped, particularly me, on days where I've hit rock bottom. Lamentations 3:21-24, which goes through this whole thing of, yet this I call to mind, even though this, therefore I'm going to have hope. Your faithfulness, great is your faithfulness, your mercies are new every morning. That verse, but in the Message version, it goes a bit deeper, and it's like that feeling of hitting rock bottom, and those verses have been ones that I've pulled out on really bad days and have spoken over my life, over our marriage, over our family. They've really helped me. And the other thing I think is the whole thing of worship, even though. So in Habakkuk 3, where it says, even though the fig tree doesn't bud, even though this and that and the other. And for us, it's even though we don't have children, even though we've been through all of this, yet we will still praise God, yet we will still look to him and worship him. And just recently, it's really hit us afresh. Actually, on this planet, we have a unique opportunity to worship God through pain. Because in Revelation, it says there'll be no more tears, no more pain, no more grief. So our only time to offer a sacrifice of worship is this lifetime. Because when we get to heaven, there's going to be no pain, there's going to be no tears. So actually, to stand on a Sunday and lift your hands and worship God, even though you've had like maybe the worst week of your life and it hurts, and to worship him anyway is like a unique opportunity. And that's really like,
it's quite a deep thing.
It's kind of marinated over years for us.
It takes, it's taken time for us to get to that point. I think that's important to say, because it's not like you just turn a switch and it's like, oh, I can worship God now. But it's actually, we've had to go through the process to be able to get to that point. And it's, it's having to actually go through the process of all the grief and the pain and the hurt to allow, it's okay. Those things are okay. And they're actually really important, but to actually, it's okay. When you're crying, it's okay to have times that are really difficult, and it's important to work through them.
And we've had those really blunt conversations with one another, where we've been able to go, actually, today's a really tough day, and I've said to Malcolm sometimes, I don't need you to say anything about this. I just need you to know it's really tough today, and I need a hug. And it's been, that's how we've managed as a couple, is being really open and real and honest with each other. And again, that's something we've learned, and it's taken years. Some days are really hard. We've spoken to you before about like anniversaries, or as we call them, sad anniversaries, where there are key dates that we know are going to be really tough. And we've actually made a conscious decision to change that around and say, actually, let's do something positive on that day. Let's go away for a weekend, or let's go out for a meal, or go to the theatre. So days that I dreaded suddenly became days I looked forward to, because we were going to do something nice together. We still had times like, if we'd go to the beach for a day, we would pray on the beach and thank God for our kids that we know are with him. So we would still do that sort of remembrance sort of side of things, but we would also do something positive. And so what I find now on those dates is like on my Facebook memories, there are all these like precious things that have happened. And so these dates that have been dates I dreaded have actually become dates full of precious memories. And that's really lovely for us. We found that really helpful.
Yeah. Just going back, Malcolm, you were just saying a few minutes ago about bottling things up. If a man's listening to this, what advice would you give to a dad who's going through something similar to what you've gone through?
I think the thing that I've had to learn is actually to keep close accounts. So to not allow things just to build up. And, we are very blessed in that we have, I think because we've gone through some stuff, so we've had to have blunt and hard conversations, which allow us to talk about stuff. Because actually talking about it has the biggest impact, because it releases that pressure. If you just bottle it up and it stays there, then it just gets harder and harder. And at some point, it'll go bang. For me, I found there was a couple of guys through the church that were really helpful. It wasn't, long hours of talking about things. It was them just, asking me a simple question. We're having a short conversation, and that just releases the pressure. So I think find people who you trust, that you can just be real with, who aren't going to judge, and you can just have those conversations. It'll be a difficult one because we're not good at it, but it's worth it. It really is. because it enables you then to support your other half. One of the things for me that I had to learn, sorry about this, but I had to learn was sometimes not to say anything.
Right.
So you had this sort of fixation of trying to fix the problem, fix the issue. You know, I'm the man, I can sort it out. Well, actually, I can't.
No.
And I had to learn to sometimes, as I think Nicky said a minute ago, you know, sometimes all she needed was a hug, and I needed to learn to actually understand that's all that she needed was a hug, rather than trying to fix a problem that I couldn't fix.
Well, thank you both ever so much for sharing so openly and honestly with us. Hopefully that would have been helpful for somebody listening. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.